Now I hope you've already watched my YouTube videos, the Mahogany Clock Part 1 and Part 2, because if you have, then what's going to happen here is going to make a whole lot more sense. It is now 10 days since I mixed up that Envirotex and poured it over my dial here. I know they say it'll harden in about 72 hours, but I've been out of town, and I'm kind of interested here to see how is it going to cut on the table saw. Well, it cut fairly easily, a lot easier actually than cutting through plexiglass, and without that odor that you get when a high-speed blade is cutting through plexiglass. I got it all squared up and trimmed down to about the right size, and now that I look at it I realize I really didn't need to pour it quite that thick. This is the first time that I've ever tried to drill through this stuff as well, and it went really easy. No splintering, no cracking. Now I've checked around, and that Ultra Seal that I'd seen people using on YouTube is not available in Canada. You can order it in, but it ends up costing about $50 for just a small little container by the time you get it here. So I got to come up with something different. And I'm going to once again try using 5-minute epoxy as sort of a sealer. You might be interested in taking about 2 minutes to watch my short little YouTube video that I made called 5-minute epoxy as a clear coat test. What I'm hoping here is that the 5-minute epoxy will seal the back of this heavy paper, and it will not allow the Envirotex to soak right through. I'm also going to paint the dial board white. I'm hoping this will work a lot better. We'll see. You may have noticed that sometimes in my videos I'll say, we'll see how it goes, or maybe it'll work, or something like that. Well, the reason for that is because I make these videos as I go along. I don't know either until it happens. It's about 2 hours now since I mixed up that 5-minute epoxy and smeared it around on the back of this paper. And as you can see, it seems to have sealed it perfectly. I can't see anywhere where that Envirotex is going to soak through and expose the dial board. Now I know I said I was going to paint the dial board white, but you got to remember this is just sort of a test. And so I'm going to test and see if I can achieve what I want without painting it white. I've mixed up another batch of the 5-minute epoxy, and I'm realizing here that I should have mixed up a little more because it's a little bit hard to get it to smear around all over. I'll have to remember that when I do the final dial board. I mixed up a little bit less of the Envirotex this time, and I was noticing that it did have difficulty flowing evenly and quickly over the entire area. I've let this set overnight now, and it's pretty hard. You can set it up on its edge and it won't flow or anything like that. I did notice though that I didn't do a very good job of getting all the bubbles to pop before I covered it up and left it. But then again, this is just a test. The final one I'll do a much better job. As you can see here, sealing the print with that 5-minute epoxy completely prevented the Envirotex from soaking through. And that's basically what this test was for. Okay, enough with the dials for a while, at least until the case is all finished. Here the frames for the little glass doors are getting glued together, and I've got a confession. This is my second attempt on this one. This was the original door that I tried to put together about 3 hours earlier. And everything was going just fine until the glue was almost set, and then I noticed something. Well, you'll notice it too. When I was cutting these pieces on the miter saw, I accidentally cut one piece with the rabbet for the glass on the outside instead of on the inside. You know, I can't believe I did that. And even more, I can't believe that I didn't notice it until it was all assembled and the glue was almost set. The epoxy's been curing for about 2 hours, and it's still just a little bit soft. Now what I want to do before the epoxy gets really hard and almost crystallizes, I want to be able to chisel out the corners where the rabbet is, where the glass is going to lay. And it's a lot easier to do it now. You can see on the corner there where there's that squeeze out and the epoxy has darkened the mahogany, but that's okay. The whole clock is going to look like that once I get it covered with varathane. Now the glass can lay nice and flat. Here I'm using a 1/4 round bit just to round over the doors a little bit, where the openings are. I thought I might give it a little bit more of a finished off look. I think this looks a lot nicer than just a sharp edge. You know, I just can't stop thinking about that dial and how I could improve on it. I'm sure that by now you figured out my last name is Calverley. It's not a very common name. I can remember many years ago my grandfather Calverley telling me that the owl was on our family crest. So this morning I googled Calverley crest, and sure enough, all kinds of owl stuff popped up. So I thought, well, maybe an owl might look nice on the final dial. So here we are. I know that I said I was going to leave the dial until after the case was finished, but when I'm thinking about something, I gotta work on it. I'm going to be a lot more careful with this dial. This dial could be the one that people will be looking at for maybe many years to come. I mixed up the Envirotex and poured it on the same way as I did on the test dial. But this one here I'm going to do a lot better job of getting all the little bubbles and any little pieces of dust and so on that may be embedded in it. And I'm also using a piece of glass to cover it over so that no dust can float down on it while it's just sitting there. Another thing that I'm doing different here is I'm going to use a blowtorch to pop the bubbles that come to the surface on this Envirotex. I remember about 20 years ago when I made a large chessboard, that worked really well. Here I'm using a flashlight to help spot any bubbles that have come to the surface, and also any dust particles that may have settled onto it somehow. And there was some. I found that by using a paper towel rolled up into a little tiny point, that when you touch where the dust particle is, the Envirotex flows into the paper towel and it takes the dust particle with it. For some reason the screws that came with these hinges stuck out a little bit proud of the surface of the hinge, and so I'm just reaming out the holes in the hinges here so that they'll be nice and flush. That way the door will close nice and tight. And just a very little bit here too. I'm going to completely assemble this clock first, and then take it apart, take all the hardware off, and then varathane it. That way I'm not going to mark the finish. I've had really good luck using magnets for holding these little doors closed in the past, and that's what I'm going to do with this clock. Have you ever noticed when you're trying to hang something heavy on the wall, there's never a stud exactly where you need it? So here I'm making a special bracket that should work pretty good anywhere on drywall. You can see how the nail will be held securely at an angle, and the more the clock pulls down on the wall, the tighter it goes against the wall. Now on the bottom of the clock is another bracket, and this bracket only has to hold the clock straight while somebody is opening the doors. It doesn't have to hold the clock up. Pretty soon I'm going to have to start working on what makes this thing tick. Well, that'll be in the next video.